Hey guys, how we doing? So I just finished writing this new blog called The Truth is Motivation Enough. And what I really tried to take on was distinguishing real truth from both cynicism on one hand and then naivete on the other. And these keep getting more and more, I think, thematically ambitious for me. So every time I sit down and do these videos, it feels more and more daunting. It could be in my head, but there's a moment of vulnerability for you. So I think where we have to start is just to say that what when people say I'm pragmatic, a lot of the time it means they're really pessimistic and they just don't really want to admit that to themselves. It's sort of seen as a bad quality in a person to be pessimistic, right? And I think understandably so, because nobody really likes to be around somebody who is just seeing everything glass is half empty. It can be draining. It can feel like it's hypercritical, or it can feel negative. But then there are people who are also way too sensitive about that kind of thing, right? And everything always has to be great and positive and lots of energy all the time. And that's also fatiguing to be around too, because life has ups and downs, right? So I think both of those ways of thinking are avoiding going with the ups and downs, right? Because a cynic, and I'll develop both of these ideas more in a moment, but the cynic is somebody who they sort of refuse to go with the ups. They think that because there's an alternation of ups and downs, that if they let themselves go with the upturn, that they'll just wind up, they'll wind up in a pit when it goes down again. And somehow the cynic believes that the downs in life are the real truth and the ups are just false promises. Excuse me, because they never last. Well, the downs never last either. So it's just that someone gets so invested in the good times that they feel sort of betrayed by the reality of their impermanence. So, but then you've also got the false positivist or the false optimist, the naive person, or the sort of falsely upbeat and everything's great. How are you? Everything's great all the time. And to me, that kind of thinking is they want to stay up here all the time, and they just are really afraid of what it feels like when life goes down here. It doesn't matter to them that it isn't going to go back up again, the same way that the cynic doesn't care that it eventually goes back up again. They're just not comfortable in the fluctuations. And it's my thinking that I adopted from mostly Eastern philosophy. Of course, there are Western philosophers who do talk about this, but I found the concept is much more developed in Eastern philosophy. Basically, and when I say that, what I really mean is, for those of you guys who want to do your own homework, what I really mean is the philosophy espoused in the Tao Te Ching and in yogic mysticism. You know, so the ups and downs of life are unavoidable. It's one of the only certain things in the world that things go up and down. Things happen in alternation, in cycles, in patterns, in seasons. And what that means is neither a pessimistic view or a cynical view or a very, very positive view is truly honest, because there is a cycle of latency, or a seed state, a gestation period, and then something is born and it grows, and then it sort of plateaus, and then it starts deteriorating and decaying, and then new life happens again. So things do go up and down. We just have to sort of reconcile ourselves to this. And I think that the motivation found in this sort of constant positivity is, to me, it's a form of avoidance that never really holds out forever, because reality always wins, right? I mean, you can believe anything you want about the world, but if those beliefs are too much in conflict with the way the world really works, then you always kind of get beaten down by it because you're working against it, or you are, let's say, you have a role in a play and you have your part and you have your own lines and they only coincide with the lines of the other actors on stage to a point, right? You're not all reading from the same script, which is to say you're not all living in the same reality. And what I think about this is that the degree to which the script that you've decided you're going to go with just does not match up with the script around you. It's a sliding scale, right? It's a gradient. It's not like you're absolutely right or you're absolutely wrong. But for the more your ideas don't stack up with the way of the world, the harder it is for you to live in it because you're just not in step with it. You're not flowing with it. To me, cynicism is, cynics always act like they're the ones who really know what's up, right? Everyone else is asleep. Everyone else is deluded. Humanity is a sheep on its way to the slaughterhouse, and I'm the only one who knows, right? And me and my cynic friends who wear all black and, I don't know, probably like Morrissey a lot, that kind of thing. Nothing against Morrissey. I don't care for it, but, I don't really have a problem with Morrissey. And I think it's important that we come to recognize that sort of thinking as being patently fear-based, right? Because it's a wholesale rejection of the world, of almost everybody living in it. Usually people like this have a very negative belief about things like love and the prospects of being happy, and they think that you can be happy on one hand and awake on another, and it's a false binary. It's a false dichotomy, So it's fear based because this is how it's fear based, because someone is pushing away life, pushing away other people, pushing away the world. Why? Because they're afraid they're going to get hurt. If you know that nothing can hurt you, or that there's no hurt that you don't have the capacity to deal with and to learn from and to grow from and to really emerge from wiser and actually more happy and enthusiastic for life, because you do know life a little better now, having gone through that, then there's nothing to run from, there's nothing to hide from, and you don't just offer these blanket explanations for everything, right? You're willing to sort of get your hands dirty and wade through sort of the swamp of the world. It gets messy, right? But when you trust yourself, and when you sort of trust your own basic goodness, and you recognize that that is just part of being human, so that goodness must be in other people to one degree or another, then cynicism sort of falls away. Cynicism is a way of shielding yourself and refusing to take risks, which is what vulnerability is about. And vulnerability really is about trusting yourself, trusting that life is worth living, even though it can be painful. And pain is meaningful to the extent that it is a way of learning and growing. Cynics have a very complicated relationship with that, but the overly positive person, they don't really want to talk about, they don't want to face the hard facts. They don't want to talk about things like the election or Syria or the pipeline, or they don't want to have a talk about, the fact that Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity are total fucking assholes, right? Just, I don't know why I picked them, but I think that's pretty hard to argue with, right? It just gets them, they get so deflated by it. They get so deflated by it that you can almost wonder if you have trampled the sensitivities of these people, like that they really just can't take it. And I know that have known people like this. Maybe this is you. Who knows? I've known some people very, very well in that way. Some good friends of mine at different points in my life. But there's this weird feeling of even if we can feel almost remorseful when we have sort of been like a bull in a china shop with the with the vulnerabilities of these sort of people who always need to be positive, when we talk about something that's real that's going on and they kind of can't hear it, I don't think this is a form of sadism when we're like that to them, because we usually feel in a weird way that I think we should own up to, almost compelled to get real with people like that, because there's an elephant in the room and there's some kind of truth about the world that they're just refusing to look at, and they're making it out to be something it's not. With cynics, it's harder to call them out unless they're really a caricature, unless they're really kind of cartoonishly exaggerated, because they just present so well, like they know the score. And the other guys, the guys who are sort of in the extreme other direction, they don't really front like that. Um, it's more like it just seems also fragile, and there's so many things that they don't want to look at. And I think the more someone refuses to look at the elephant in the room, I think the more we are all compelled to say, like, come on, it's right here, come on. It's a bit like the parable of the cave, just go Google that, because I don't really, it'll be a bit much to explain it. I'll be opening too much of a can of worms. But the point is, are all these guys trapped in a cave, and there's a fire in the middle of the cave, like a campfire, and they're only seeing the shadows of the world going on outside the cave, the shadows on the wall. That's all they're seeing. And one of them escapes, and he sees reality for what it is, and he comes back, and you just can't imagine this story of this person being liberated and really getting to truth without him coming back and telling the others. That's such an important part of it. That's what it means to have some kind of realization, is you see the world through new eyes, and it just has to be shared. So this is a watered down version of that, the way that we usually feel compelled to point out whatever someone else refuses to look at, right? It's like knowledge is valuable for its own sake. And if you're afraid of being almost injured by knowledge about the world that is hard to digest, it just means that you have subscribed to some sort of illusions that provide you with a sense of security. But that security is very, it's a very false sense of security. It's very thin and flimsy, because it only gives you as much security to the it only I'll say it like this: it only gives you security to the degree that you can keep avoiding whatever fact about reality is being obscured by your illusion. So it limits you in the kinds of experiences you can have, in the kinds of things you are open to learning about yourself and other people and about the world. It restricts the kinds of communication you can have with other people. It restricts the kinds of environments you can be in, either at home or professionally, you name it. Nothing but limitations. And if anything, we're interested in discarding all the limitations we can. I don't mean discarding limitations like limitations of moral judgment. I mean like things that box you in, things that reduce you beneath the level of your full potential. Cynics are limited because they have so many more no's than yeses, and they're always speaking about their no's. Well, these other guys, these sort of fake positivity people, they want there to be only yeses, right? So they're both missing out. That's sort of my point. And the truth itself is very different from that. The truth just doesn't run from anything. Truth is a state of trust. It's a state that there's nothing that I want to hide from these eyes. There's nothing that I want to hide from my heart, because yes, it may be difficult, but if it's real, then its existence has been granted. I can't deprive this thing of existence. I can't deprive the world of the existence of disappointment or failure or heartbreak or illness or old age or the immaturity of youth. You name it. These are all just facts. They're just facts of life, right? So, and they were here before I got here. So nothing that I can do with this guy right here is going to subtract those things from the world. So I have to believe in my ability to face life head on. I just have to. And you don't really cultivate truth. You don't really cultivate, I would say, your capacity for it. I'm of the belief that truth is intrinsic to us. It's fundamental, right? And if you just observe small children for almost any length of time, that's at more than enough confirmation, because children are, I mean, notoriously truthful, right? They will blurt things out that are inappropriate and are embarrassing for the adults, right? They just say exactly, they say and act, they can't always verbalize what they feel, but they will always act on their feelings. So that's a kind of truthfulness. It's not truthfulness in the sense of knowing a lot of facts or knowing a lot of information, but it's a state of being genuine and not needing to convince yourself that the world is anything other than what it really is, not needing to convince yourself that you feel any other way that you actually feel. There's a basic honesty, a basic truthfulness, and a basic flowing with the world that whatever response is stirred up in you by your reality, that you're okay with it. It might hurt, you might be unhappy, you might want it to change, but you're not pretending that you don't feel that way. That's really what truth is all about. And again, we don't cultivate it because it's inherent to us. So what do we do to become, I would say, more capable of expressing our true nature, to sort of own our truth, if you want to put it in that kind of way? Well, what you do is you operate subtractively. You just take away everything that has sort of adhered to you, that is other to you, alien to you, and that impedes your authentic expression of your real self. And what that means is actually quite simple. I think I can border on new agey language sometimes. I would not say that I have a new agey bone in my body, but there is a different kind of rhetoric here. You subtract illusions. You subtract the illusions. So if you want to think of knowledge as something sacred, learning and wisdom as sacred, well, let's say there's sort of a temple of knowledge here and here, right? The mind and the heart working together is sort of this temple of knowledge. Well, your discernment is a kind of sacrificial knife where truth and illusion are separated from each other by this blade of discernment, and reality and wisdom are sort of enshrined, and illusions are burnt or discarded in some way. So how do you come to be willing to see the world for what it really is? How do you carve away your illusions? And what I believe about this is that there has to be a kind of love for yourself that guides you. When you wish to know yourself more fully, know your world more fully, and really reconcile yourself to the world, so that you can live without self-consciousness, that you can just live and just be natural, that you can allow yourself to go for the things you want in life. You can allow yourself to be how you really feel. Doesn't mean you always act out on all of your feelings all the time, but it does mean that you're not in conflict with your feelings. See, just because you don't act on something doesn't mean you're in conflict with it. The conflict is all in here, really. It's all a mental game. Someone who is totally authentic doesn't just blurt out everything. That's not really what authenticity is about. It's really about accepting inside whatever is happening inside. It doesn't always have to come out. That's the thing. That's just self-control. Self-control is not repression. Repression is repression. There's, you know, the repression is that you are not okay with feeling how you're feeling. Self-control is understanding that it's not always a good idea to act on every single thing you think and feel, and that you can choose not to act on it without repressing yourself, but you can acknowledge and honor the presence of those thoughts in the moment and say, I'm going to find another way to deal with this, but I will deal with it. Okay? So if you don't have a kind of love for yourself, how do you do this work? I think you just can't do it, because then you go into working on yourself. And working on yourself for most people is really a form of self-punishment. It's really that they hate themselves, they have loathing for themselves, and they're in this weird phase where they're a little bit too aware of the flaws in their thinking, in the false beliefs they have, in the self-destructive patterns that they have. And they're going to just make themselves do as much yoga or Pilates or meditating or drink enough wheatgrass, and then someday it will somehow go away. Maybe it will, but chances are it won't. If you're trying to make something go away, um, I think I can say pretty conclusively you will achieve nothing, because what you want is to integrate. You want reconciliation. You want to make peace. You don't want to finally kill off every last person in the enemy army and every woman and child in their village. You want to make peace with the other side so that there is no fighting. There will never be one last act of violence that can end all future violent acts. That is just not the way. That would be like, I'll start a fire so big that there won't be anything left to catch on fire ever again. Well, that's just great. I mean, is that really what you want? Let's not be like that. Let's make peace, right? So you need to be fueled by a love for yourself, to make peace with yourself, to make peace with life, and to see life with open eyes and an open mind, and to not need to hide behind any made-up ideas about the world, which is either pessimism or naivete, however, whichever one you fall into. They're both false. They're both false. The truth does not need to make up rules. It does not need to hide behind concepts. It just wants the real thing every time. The truth wants every euphemistic concept or crutch concept to be taken away. It just wants reality. There's a longing for reality, the same way that you're really just longing to be your real self, your real true self, without any impediment, without some sort of hyper-intellectualism shutting it down, or some kind of very impulsive lifestyle, on the other hand, where you're just running away from your thoughts. You don't want either of those things. You just want real life. And you've got to really be you to live any kind of real life. It's one and the same. So what do I mean when I say love anyway? I definitely don't mean narcissism or vanity. You know, what I do mean is, I think, a real sense of love for the inherent possibilities of any human life. A real sense of awe and respect for the vastness of your sort of mental emotional vortex, and really, again, this yearning to empty yourself of unresolved, unfulfilled potential, unrealized potential, that you want to keep growing, that you want to be like the way little kids are always just growing, you know, babies and stuff. They're learning how to walk, they're learning how to run, they're learning how to speak and express themselves. And you feel alive when you're growing, and when you're really connecting with people, and when you're just taking your game to the next level, if you want to say it like that. And the real truthfulness, actually, where truth begins, is itself a kind of love, because it really means to admit that, all things being equal, you want to be happy. That's number one. Number two is to admit to yourself that you believe, because you do, you cannot not believe this. You do believe that any real increase in happiness, in peace, in real connection between people would be worth the effort. If you were left with more happiness, more peace of mind, more inspiration, more connection to others on the other side of a certain amount of effort, it would be worth it. You should do it. And the third thing is, you know there is nothing selfish about increasing your happiness in life. There is nothing selfish about getting more peace for yourself, getting more connection to other people, getting more inspiration. That real happiness and love and peace and inspiration and connection can never be obtained at the cost of another's well-being. There is no such thing as Machiavellianism in happiness. There is no ends justify the means. I said somewhere else in the gratitude blog that people who think they can only get what they want through illegitimate means and at the expense of another's sovereignty or their rights or their well-being, they think the game is rigged against them, at the very least, and they can't get what they want unless they break the rules, unless they cheat, unless they cut in line. No real happiness comes from that. Again, that's because it doesn't stack up with reality. You can go about things the right way and they will come to you, and they'll be much cleaner when they come to you, when you acquire them legitimately. It might take longer, but what's the point of getting something right away if it's tainted? Or if you can't live with yourself once you have it, to some degree or another, right? So there is no real collateral damage for living a peaceful, happy, loving life. So there's no reason not to pursue it. You want it. It's worth the effort, and it could never hurt another person. That's a real kind of honesty right there, because you are allowing yourself to believe what is true about yourself. That is true about you. All things being equal, you would rather be happy. You believe that being happy is worth the price, worth the effort. You believe that you couldn't possibly hurt somebody else by just choosing what makes you happy. That's reality. That's the reality of who you are. And when you admit that, and you believe it, and become convinced of it, and embrace it, then it becomes very easy to carve away the vestiges of untruth from your life, to drop self-defeating beliefs or patterns of behavior. Because when you take that idea of love and trust and connection and inspiration and peace as being intrinsic to you, and that to acquire them or to increase the frequency and the depth of those in your life is just to restore yourself to who you really are, then it's sort of like if you're a bouncer at a nightclub and you have a list of who's allowed in and who's not. Well, when you know who's allowed in, then you know who not to let in. Very simple. It's very simple. You could say it any which way you want it. If you're an expert surgeon, you can remove a tumor without cutting a major artery. If you're in the bomb squad, then you know which wires to cut and which wires not to cut. So discernment, the kind of discernment that we're talking about, actually requires this kind of love for yourself. Because if you don't know your true nature, or you're unwilling to admit it to yourself, then how do you make choices in the interest of your best interests and the interests of other people? How do you know when you're putting someone else's needs ahead of your well-being, as opposed to you're just being helpful and you're just being a giver? There's a line between giving and overgiving. How do you know where that line is if you don't know that you deserve peace and happiness and that that's natural to you? Because you don't know how to look out for it. You don't know how to preserve it. You don't know what will take it away from you You don't know, but we'll give you more of it. You just when you don't know, you don't know, right? So knowing who you are, knowing what it means to be you, believing true statements about yourself will clarify everything in your life. Period. Like period, end of story. And in the words of Michelangelo, he said he did not carve the David. He just removed everything from that block of marble that was not David. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this served you. I hope this left you with a new kind of clarity, or maybe just more questions. But these are worthwhile questions. And if you do have questions, then as I always say, please send them my way. I do want to hear them. I really would like to have the dialogue with you if it's on your mind. That's exactly what I'm here for. So again, my name is Jasvinder. Guys, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk again soon. All right.